Good morning, friends. Today I'll be continuing with our sessions on the Sāṃkhya darśana. We'll start with a small prayer. வினைவோம் அன்னை வயிற்றில் பிறந்த தொல்லைவோம் போகாத்து எறும்போம் நல்ல குணமதிக மாமருணை கோபுரத்தில் வீட்டிருக்கும் கணபதியை கை தொழுதக்கால் காட்டு வழி போனாலும் கல்லர் பயமானாலும் கேட்டு வழி காலனார் வந்து கிட்டிடினும் நாட்டமுடன் நம்பிக்கை உண்டே விநாயகனார் தும்பிக்கை உண்டே துணை உருவாய் அருவாய் உலகாய் இலதாய் மறுவாய் மலராய் மணியாய் ஒளியாய் கருவாய் உயிராய் கதியாய் விதியாய் குருவாய் வருவாய் அருவாய் குகனே அம்மையே அப்பா பிலாமணியே அன்பில் நுழைந்த ஆரமுதே பொய்மையே பெருக்கி பொழுதுனை சுருக்கும் தூதலை கொலையேன் தனக்கும் செம்மையே ஆய சிவபதம் அளித்த செல்வமே சிவபெருமானே இம்மையே உன்னை சிக்கென பிடித்த நிகழ்ந்தருளினியே அருட்ஜோதி தெய்வமணி ஆட்கொண்ட தெய்வம் அம்பரத்தில் ஆடுகின்ற ஆனந்த தெய்வம் பொருட்சாரும் மறைகளெல்லாம் போற்றுகின்ற தெய்வம் போதாந்த தெய்வம் உயர் நாதாந்த தெய்வம் இருட்பாடு நீக்கியோடு ஈந்தருளும் தெய்வம் எண்ணிய நான் எண்ணியவார் எனக்கருளும் தெய்வம் திருப்பாடல் ஒந்தனைத்தும் சிவமாக்கும் தெய்வம் சிற்சபையில் விளங்குகின்ற தெய்வம் அதே தெய்வம் தரம் தரும் கல்வி தரும் ஒரு நாளும் தளர்வறியா மனம் தரும் தெய்வ வடிவும் தரும் நெஞ்சில் வஞ்சமில்லா இனம் தரும் நல்லன எல்லாம் தரும் அன்பர் என்பவர்க்கே கணம் தரும் தரும் கல்வி தரும் ஒரு நாளும் தளர்வறியா மனம் தரும் தெய்வ வடிவும் தரும் நெஞ்சில் வஞ்சமில்லா இனம் தரும் நல்லன எல்லாம் தரும் அன்பர் என்பவர்க்கே கணம் தரும் பூங்குழாட பிராமி கிடைக்கங்களை களையாத கல்வியும் குறையாத வயதும் கபடு வாராத நட்பும் கன்றாத உடமையும் குன்றாத இளமையும் கழுவினி இல்லாத உடலும் செழியாத மனமும் அன்பகலாத மனைவியும் தவறாத சந்தானமும் தாழாத கீர்த்தியும் மாறாத வார்த்தையும் தடைகள் வராத கொடையும் தொலையாத நிதியமும் கோணாத கோலும் துன்பம் இல்லாத வாழ்வும் துய்யனின் பாதத்தில் அன்பும் உதவி பெரிய தொண்டரோடு கூட்டு கண்டாய் அலையாழி அறுத்துயில் மாயினது தங்கையே ஆதிக்கட ஊரின் வாழ்வை அமுதீசர் உருவாக மகளாத சுகபாணி அல்வாமி அபிராமி உமையே गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वर गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मं तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः गुरवे सर्वलोकानां विशजे भवरोगिणां निधे सर्वविद्यानां श्री दक्षिणामूर्ते नमः ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां शैग्रीव उपास्महे अच्युतं केशवं रामनारायणं कृष्णदामोदरं वासुदेवं भजे श्रीधरं माधवं गोपिकावल्लभं जानकीनायकं रामचन्द्रं भजे बुद्धिबलं यशोधैर्यं निर्भयत्वम् अरोगदार्ढ्यं वाक्पटुं सन्नं भवेत् बुद्धिबलं यशोधैर्यं निर्भयत्वम् अरोगदार्ढ्यं सन्नं भवेत् ओम स्वामिये शरणमय्यप्पं स्वामिये शरणमय्यप्पं स्वामिये शरणमय्यप्पा திருள் பிரகாசவலலா திவ்ய திருவடிகளே சரணம் வள்ளல் மலரடி வாழ்க வாழ்க எல்லா உயிர்களும் இன்புற்று வாழ்க. Let me share my screen. We are in the process of discussing Sāṃkhya darśana. So we have done earlier sessions. Now today we will be focusing on the theological context of Sāṃkhya philosophy. So that is the main theme of today's session that I am taking now. Okay. So this is part of the larger initiative of the philosophical perspectives on Indian eternal wisdom. So bhāratīyasanātanadharma, that is what the overall focus is. After that, sāṃkhya is the first darśana where we are deep diving. Okay, again to just start a prayer. சிவன் அவன் என் சிந்தையில் நின்று அதனால் அவனருளாலே அவன் தாள் வணங்கி சிந்தை மகிழ சிவபுராணம் தன்னை முந்தை வினை முழுதும் உரைப்பேன் யான். சிவபுராணம். சதோமா சத்கமய தமசோமா ஜோதிர்கமய மிருத்யோர்மா அமிர்தங்கமய. ஓம் சாந்தி சாந்தி சாந்தி. So far our journey is that we started with the perceptor lineage, the Guru Parampara of in Sāṃkhya Darshana, okay, and then we moved on to the astrological chronology, and then we started the important treatises in Sāṃkhya Darshana. Then we started understanding the etymology of the term Sāṃkhya and its related concepts. Then we moved on to the Purusha Lakshanam and Prakriti Lakshanam. And then we talked about the wedlock between these two entities, the Purusha and the Prakriti. We saw that the two major categorical entities at the broadest level is a duality between Purusha and Prakriti. So we saw its nomenclatures, we saw its characteristics, and we saw how there's a unbound wedlock between them. Okay, so next we will be focusing today on the theological context of Sāṃkhya Darshana. Okay, so we'll see how does theology get embedded into the Sāṃkhya Darshana, particularly in terms of the Purusha Prakriti relationship and how the Purusha and Prakriti is treated from a theological context. Okay. So in the first session, we had a brief overview of Sāṃkhya Darshana from a religious perspective, samaya darśīka. So even before getting into Sāṃkhya, we started getting into what is a religion, okay, what are the different types of religions, okay, and the religions of India, and then we also briefly discussed the different scriptures associated with these religions. So these religions are broadly classified, and how within each of these religions scriptures are broadly classified within each of them. So this is the first video. You can the link is below. So this will give you the video. Okay, so this next session we moved on to next level of deep dive into what do you mean by philosophy in general. So from an introduction to religion and scriptures, we moved on to the philosophical aspects of it. So what is philosophy? What are the different branches of philosophy, and how the branches are further classified across multiple schools. Okay, and then we also saw the geographical, the Oriental and the Occidental schools, the Western and the Eastern schools. Okay, and then we saw the historiographical timeline, stereographical timeline of the evolution of philosophical thought. And then we also saw some mind maps and alternate classifications of the philosophies in general. So the video for that is this. Moving on, we then moved on to the native philosophical traditions of India. So the earlier video session was more on philosophy in general. Then we moved specifically to the Indian subcontinent. So the philosophy of India. Okay, so the infographic mind map specific to Indian philosophies, and then the stages of philosophical development with respect to India, then the Vedic philosophies, then the Orthodox philosophies, and the sixfold Vedic philosophies. So we got an overview of all these concepts in the next video. This is that video. The link is provided. Okay, the links for all these are provided in the descriptions. Then we moved on to one of the main Indian philosophies and one of the philosophies technically belonging to the darśanas, the sixfold astika darshanas, and it is also one of the oldest. So we moved on to the specifics of Sāṃkhya Darshana. So there we saw the preceptor lineage, the Guru Parampara. Then we also saw how the historiographical chronology of its evolution. And then we saw the important treatises within the Sāṃkhya darśana. This is the video there. The link is provided. Then we moved on to understanding the etymology of Sāṃkhya, the characteristics of the Purushas, the characteristics of Prakriti. Okay, the video is here. So then we moved on to the concept called unbounded wedlock. So this is the next slide. I think there's an error in type. This is the scope that we discussed. We saw how there is an unbound wedlock between Purusha and Prakriti. We had a very detailed session running for 2 hours. So the video link is here. Finally, we come to today's session, which is on the theological context of Sāṃkhya philosophy. Okay, we saw how the wedlock between Purusha and Prakriti in general. Now we'll take it more from a theological context of it in the subsequent slides covered today. Okay, so if you take the bucket, how we classified the Sāṃkhya philosophy, it can be classified under 3 major groups or themes. One is the theistic declarative philosophy, okay, which is the śāstrada sāṅkhya darśana. Then there is the theistic come atheistic declarative philosophy, which is the śāstrada nireshwara sāṅkhya darśana, which is more of a theistic plus atheistic, so which is somewhere in between. And then we have the atheistic Sāṃkhya philosophy, which is the nireshwara sāṅkhya darśana. So if you take the period, the historic categorization, of course, this the historical categorization is under academic debate still. But the popular or more widely accepted theory is that the earliest school of philosophy was based on theistic doctrines, and then there, which was basically covered in scriptures like the Mahabharata, various sections of the Mahabharata, and the Mahapuranas. Okay. So this is the theistic declaration, and then there is the hybrid of theistic and non-theistic version, which is covered in texts including Mahabharata and the Ayurveda treatises like the Charaka Samhita. Okay. So the third part is the more popular classical Sāṃkhya, more popular from the Western philosophy point. They popularize it more, where it is more of Nireshwara Vada, more of an atheistic philosophy. So there are 3 major scopes in which the Sāṃkhya philosophy has spread out in Indian history. It has a theistic flavor, it has an atheistic flavor, and it has a hybrid flavor. So we have texts from Mahabharata, the Mahapuranas, and then we have the Ayurveda text containing the Sāṃkhya flows, and then we have the actual Prasthana Grantaha, which includes the classical period of Sāṃkhya, okay, where it is more of the Nireshwara Vada that is getting advocated there. Okay. So what are the critical differences between these schools of these branches of Sāṃkhya darśana when it comes to the existence of God? The theistic model naturally accepts the existence of God, the atheistic model denies the existence of God. Okay, for example, in the classical Prakarana Granthas, it is specifically denied in certain texts. We will see that. Okay, and hybrid period, the middle period where it is not discussed. Basically, it was more agnostic to the existence of God. So God's presence is irrelevant in the narrative of the schema. Uh, and then moving on to the God's role in creation. God provides an initial impulse or guidance of the Prakriti. So he provides, is like the efficient cause, that the trigger. He is not a creator. So Sāṃkhya believes in Satkarya Vada. So there is creation pre-exists in the cause. So the effect pre-exists in the cause. So we will deep dive when we get there. Okay. In the hybrid model, there is no specific role of God, as we already discussed. In the atheistic model, Prakriti and Purusha are there's no divine intervention in the relationship between Prakriti and Purusha. It is like in modern science. So man interacts with the world, or consciousness interacts with the mind interacts with matter, or whatever, however you look at it. So it is more like a modern science perspective. Okay. And then when it comes to the cosmic evolution, Ishvara Sankalpa, God's divine will, is considered to be the cause of the evolution of nature in the theistic model. In the atheistic model, the cause of nature's evolution is the proximity of the spirit. So there is no God here, there is no will of God, etc. It is just that Purusha and Prakriti have indirect relationship, which we saw that as the wedlock, that unbound wedlock. So just by the proximity, like just as a magnet, proximity of a magnet has some impact on the small iron pieces around it. Okay, so like that, proximity brings the relationship in the evolution of the Prakriti, triggers that. Okay, and in the hybrid model, it also focuses more on the mechanics of this evolution, similar to the theistic model. Okay, when it comes to the moksha marga, so there is a discriminative intelligence between spirit and nature, and divine grace is needed for the spirit to get liberated from the bondage of nature or Prakriti. The bondage, I mean, it's not uh, the time of bondage is more of unbound wedlock, but that itself can be liberated from only through divine grace. Okay. So whereas in theistic or agnostic models, it is only between Purusha and Prakriti. There is no divine intervention there. Okay. And when it comes to the important treatises, you already saw Mahabharata, sections of Mahabharata, particularly the Shanti Parva, Moksha Parva within the Mahabharata, deal at length with the theistic model of Sāṃkhya darśana. And the Mahapuranas deal at length again with that concept. When it comes to this one, we already saw that there are sections of Mahabharata, and the Charaka Samhita is the provides hybrid model, which is neither theistic nor atheistic. And then when it comes to the classical model, there are many treatises, but the most important among them is the Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra and Sāṃkhya Karika, and the corresponding commentorial literature around it. Okay. And finally, when talking about the arguments for or against God, so there is a logical necessity for God highlighted in the theistic model. There is a denial of God in the theistic model, and there is a the discussion around God is simply ignored in the hybrid model. Okay. So in a nutshell, all three models are provided in Sāṃkhya. So there is a misnomer or a myth saying that Sāṃkhya is only atheistic in its approach. No, that is only one of the branches of Sāṃkhya, which is the classical Sāṃkhya. Okay, this, as I mentioned earlier, the theistic model is very categorically establishing the Mahabharata, wherein Maheshwara, the supreme deity, manifests itself as an all-enclosing holistic principle. Okay, so Aparishesha Sakalya Tattva, Sakalya Tattva. So which means that the highest principle here is theologized in these sections of the Mahabharata as Mahavishnu. Okay. So, for example, part of the Vibhuti Yoga. Okay. So there is in the 11th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which overall forms part of the corpus within the Mahabharata. There is the following sloka within the 11.38, where it says that you are the primal deity, the ancient person. You are the supreme resort of this world. You are the knower, as also the object of knowledge and the supreme abode. O you infinite forms, the universe is pervaded by you. Okay. So here it very clearly says that God is the main source and God is Mahavishnu here, because Arjuna, it is a dialogue between Arjuna and Sri Krishna Paramatma, who is the Gitacharya here. Okay, so the glorification of this verse is to Mahavishnu, who is the Paramapurusha. Sri Adi Shankaracharya Bhagavad-pada in his commentary on this explains it further. You are the Atideva, the primary deity, because of being the creator of the universe. The Purana, ancient, eternal Purusha. So you are the Parama Purusha. You are also the Purana Purusha. Okay, person derived in the sense of staying in the town, the Pura, that is the body. While discussing the etymology of Purusha, we already saw that what Purusha means. Purusha means, so is one who resides in a city or in a town, which symbolizes the body here. Okay, so that is what is highlighted by the Bhashyakara here. You very well are the Parama Supreme. So, okay, you are the highest resort, you are a supreme resort in which this entire universe comes to rest at the time of final dissolution. So during the Pralaya Kala, the entire manifested universe withdraws itself back into the divinity. Okay, you are the Veta, the knower of all things to be known. You are also the Vedyam, object of knowledge. So he is the knower, he is the subject of knowledge, the object of knowledge, the process of knowing. He is all the three. Okay, so that is how Sri Adi Shankaracharya, as the Bhashyakara, explains the verses of the Gitacharya here. Similarly, that there is a correspondence of Maheshwara, or so the Saguna Guna, the divinity within the qualities. Okay, so the Saguna Gunatvam, the supreme deity with divine qualities. Okay, they call it as the Nitya Kalyana Gunas. Okay, so is provided, okay, as interface with Shiva. Okay, so right side there is a Bhagavad Gita verse which says that you are the Adideva, the primal deity, because of being the creator of the universe. The Purana, ancient, eternal Purusha, derived in the sense of staying in the town. Sorry, this is the same slide. Okay. Again, in the Bhagavad Mahapurana, the personality of Godhead is answered. The yoga system, which relates to Lord and the individual soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entities and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system. O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called as conditioned life. So here, from a Paramatma stage, he now explains the Jivatma stage, where it is conditioned by trifold gunas, the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, about which we will deep dive later. So when one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed and produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possesses as mine. So ahangara and mamagara is highlighted here as one's own mind becomes purified. So one who transcend these ahangara and mamagara related bindings, then in that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent. So, from human realm, he can realize the divine realm. That is what is highlighted here. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. Perfection in self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yoga unless he engages in devotional service. Again, for the Jivatma, he can attain or he can realize the divine, the Paramatma's within him only by the divine grace. So that is where devotion comes in. So here also there is a importance on the Purusha of the Jiva Purusha and its need or its dependence on the Parama Purusha for its grace. Now we will see how the concept is highlighted in different schools of Indian philosophy, particularly Hindu philosophies, which have been influenced by the Sāṃkhya darśana. So we take the Smartha Sampradaya, which is the Kevala Advaita Vedanta darśana, formally founded by Gaudapadacharya. So based on the Vedic and Upanishadic philosophies. So he formally founded Gaudapadacharya, and which was the tradition was passed on to Govindapadacharya, but it was further institutionalized by Sri Adi Shankaracharya, who is considered today as the founding establishment of the this sampradaya. So here Jivatman and Paramatman are identified. So Jivatman operates in within the bounded scope of Vyavaharika Sattva, and Jivatma is multiple, operating from the Vyavaharika Sattva, which is the empirical realm. From the empirical realm, there are multiple Atmas, Jivatmas, and each of these Jivatmas are governed by the collective consciousness, which is the Ishvara Tattva, within the scope of the Vyavaharika Sattva. Okay, and so this is the Purusha. The Prakriti is the entire Jagat in which the Jivas operate. So the operating ground is the Jagat, and so the Kshetrajna is the Jivatman, the kshetra is the jagat, the world, and it is all governed by Ishvara Tattva. So, which is all part of the Vyavaharika Sattva, which is again a product of Maya within Shankaradvaita. So, the Veda between Jivatma and Paramatma, or Jivatman and Maheshwara, is more of a virtual relationship, which is more of an illusion or mithyatva. That is what it is not unreal, it is not asatya, but it is a mithya. Okay, we'll discuss more about it when we deep dive into Kevaladvaita. So the Purusha and Prakriti are recognized in Shankaradvaita, which is split between Purusha taking the Atma. Atma is again categorized as Jivatma and Paramatma within the Vyavaharika state. But at the Paramarthika state, the Jivatma is the Paramatma, and Paramatma is nothing but Brahman, and there is only one entity called Paramatman, which is Brahman. So there is only one and only entity called Brahman. Okay. So the sole principle is Jivatman and Maheshwara within Vyavaharika Sattva. Within the same Vyavaharika Sattva, there is a material principle, which is a Jagat Tattva. Okay, so this is how the Purusha and Prakriti is interpreted in the Vedantic school of Advaita. Okay, so then let us look at the Sri Vaishnava's theological traditions, like the Vishishtadvaita Tattva. Sri Vaishnavam is one of the sampradayas of the Vaishnava Matas, formally established by Yamunacharya and then institutionalized by Ramanujacharya. This again is part of the Vedantic corpus of Uttamimamsa Vedanta Darshanas, along with the Kevaladvaita. Here also Purusha and Prakriti are recognized. The Sāṃkhya doctrines of Purusha and Prakriti are recognized. Here also there is Chit, and the Jivatman is called as a Chit here because it is a sentient principle. The Paramatma, which is Maheshwara, which is non-sectarian in the Kevaladvaita. The Maheshwara corresponds to Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, all the Trimurtis, Shakti, all forms of divinities. In fact, it is it integrates the Shanmada's traditions like Shaivam, Shaktam, Ganapatyam, Kaumaram, and Vaishnavam, and Sauram. So Sauram means Surya or the Vedic deities. Okay. So Maheshwara corresponds to all these divinities. So it is a non-sectarian philosophy as far as Shankaradvaita is concerned. But when it comes to Ramanuja's Advaita, it is theistic and monotheistic in its thing, where Mahavishnu is considered to be the highest Maheshwara, and all other divinities are like subordinate to it. Okay, so the Purusha, the Paramapurusha is Mahavishnu, theologized as Mahavishnu, while the Jivatman is theologized as the Chit principle. Okay, and the Achit principle is nothing but the Prakriti Tattva, all the material principle, which is insentient principle. Okay, so when it comes to the Brahma Vaishnava theological tradition, which is also coming under the Vaishnava Sampradaya, Vaidika Vaishnava Sampradaya, and philosophically it is called as Tattvavada and also called as the Dvaitavada. So it is the Dvaita Vedanta Uttamimamsa Darshana. It was formally institutionalized by Sri Madhvacharya. Here also Purusha and Prakriti is recognized. Here also Purusha takes a dual role of Jivatman and Paramatman. But the Paramatman is again Mahavishnu here because it is again a Vaishnavite school. The Jivatma is called as a dependent principle here. It is a dependent principle, and it is dependent on Paramapurusha, which is Mahavishnu. So Jivatma is dependent, and it is also multiple. and it is it depends on Mahavishnu, and the Prakriti principle is called as a Jada Tattva. Okay, the difference between Vishishtadvaitam and Dvaita Darshana is that Vishishtadvaitam considers a relationship of a part and a whole relationship, which is also called as Anga Angi relationship. It is also called it as a Dharma Dharmin relationship, or substance attribute relationship. So there is a tighter coupling between the Jivatma, Paramatma, and the Achit Tattva in Vishishtadvaita. So it is like the part and the whole, or the attribute and the substrate kind of relationship. For example, there is a Sharira Shariri Bhava between in two levels. So there is a Sharira where the world is the Sharira for the Jiva, and Jivatma is a Sharira for the underlying Paramatma. So Paramatma is the innermost Antarayami divinity, which is wrapped by the Jivatma, and the Jivatma is again wrapped within the Sharira. So Sharira, Sharirin becomes an hierarchical here. Of course, here Mahavishnu plays multiple roles. So there are different kinds of avataras explained in Vishishtadvaita based on the definitions given in the Agama schools. So there are two major branches of Indian scriptures. One is the Vedic Sampradayas, the Vedas. So the Vedic corpus, which includes the mantra samhitas and the Brahmana, Aranyaka, and the Upanishads. This is how vertically the Vedic corpus is categorized. And then there is a horizontal split again across these four categories. So there is the Rig Vedam, Yajur Vedam, Sama Vedam, and Atharvana Vedam. So this is each of these Rig Vedam, Sama Vedam, and Atharvana Vedam, etc., are again classified into the vertical slices of, the horizontal slices of the mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and the Upanishads. Okay, so while this is one school of thought, there is again a parallel school of scriptures called as Agamas, which includes Shaiva Agamas, Vaishnava Agamas, and Shakta Agamas. Okay, so the Saiva Agamas are used in Saiva philosophies, and Vaishnava Agamas are used in Vaishnava philosophies. So all these Vaishnava related Vedantas, like the Vishishtadvaita or the Tattvavada, the Dvaitavada that we are talking about, all these darshanas integrate both the Agama and the Vedic darshanas, the Vedic Shastras. So unlike the Advaita school, the Kevala Advaita school, the first one that we are talking about, the line item A here, where Kevala Advaita only focuses predominantly on the Vedic corpuses. Okay, so only on the Vedas and not much on the Agamas. So they do not consider Agamas as part of their main pramanas. Okay, however, the other schools of Vedantas, including whatever we have seen so far, particularly the Vaishnavite schools, support the Vaishnava Agamas parallelly. So these Vaishnava Agamas define the relationship of Purusha into Jivatman and Paramatman, and the Paramatman takes different avatars, which is called as Para, which is a transcendent avatara, Vibhava, Vyuha, Archa Avadara, and Antaryami Avadara. These fivefold kind of avataras. Out of that, the Vibhava Avadara is the more popular one, which is explained much in the Mahapuranas, where Vishnu takes multiple avataras, including the famous Dashavadaras. So that is one part of the avataras. So Mahavishnu takes multiple avataras, out of which the Antaryami Avadara is the innermost Avadara, which forms the innermost crux, the sharirin of the jivatma, who forms the sharira, and sharira, the jivatma itself forms the sharirin for the jagat. So that is the kind of relationship there. In Tattvavada, also these agamas are supported, but they don't categorize into relationship of the container relationship of either in terms of sharira, sharirin bhava, or in terms of wave and the ocean kind of examples, right? So they don't take the part and whole relationship or the attribute and property relationship. So that they are looking at it as a dependent and independent relationship. So the jivas are dependent entities, separate entities. That is why Tattvavada doesn't have the prefix of suffix of Advaita as part of it, while Vishishta Advaita has the prefix, as part of it, the suffix of Advaita. So it is Vishishta Advaita. So it is still non-dual, but it is qualified non-dual. Okay, what it means we'll see later. But here in Tattvavada, there is pure duality. Okay, that's why it is called as a Dvaita Darshana. But it is also called as Tattvavada because it talks about multiple tattvas. It is not just duality, it talks about multiple tattvas. And this Tattvavada, the ontological categorization, is derived both from Sāṃkhya darśana as well as from Vaisheshika darśana. Unlike the early Kevala Advaita, where the main ontology is only from Sāṃkhya darśana. Okay, so we will deep dive when we get into the ontological models. Then we move into Shuddhadvaita Saiva Siddhanta Darshana, which is based on the Agamas, which is also called as the Siddhanta Saivam, and which is based on the Shaiva Agamas as well as the Maiganda Satirangals in Tamil. This is more popular in Tamil Nadu. So there are scriptures in Tamil Nadu which is called as Maiganda Satirangal, which are all philosophical scriptures. And there are also scriptures. Okay, and these scriptures are more of prakarana granthas, which are basically derived from the Shaiva Agamas. There are 28 Shaiva Agamas attributed to Shaiva Siddhanta. Here Purusha and Prakriti are also recognized. Here Purusha is treated as Pasu, which is a bound principle, as a Jivatman. Again, the Purusha has a role of a Paramatman, where it is Sadashiva or Paramashiva. While in Vaishnavite school, it is Mahavishnu. In Shaivite school, the same Paramatma is treated as Paramashiva. Okay, and the Pasa, the bondage of these Pasus is instrumentalized through the Prakriti. The Prakriti is not only the world, but also the bondage that which binds the Pasus. Okay, so this is how the categorization in Saiva Siddhanta happens. So far we have seen that all these schools accept Purusha and Prakriti. Now the Purusha and Prakriti are theologically split into Jivatman and Paramatman, and in the theological schools, which are non-sectarian, they have Vishnu or Shiva respectively as the Purusha, whereas in Kevala Advaita, which is more sectarian, the Maheshwara role or Paramapurusha role is played by every divinity. Okay, of course, there are others of Vedanta or Siddhanta. We will discuss it as we move along. For me, Shaivism also is there, which is called as Trika or Paramadvaita Trika Shaivism, or there is the Veerasaiva tradition. Okay, similarly, there is a Vallabhacharya's Vedanta tradition. There are Nimbarkacharya's Vedanta tradition. Then there is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tradition. Okay, so I am not getting into those details now, but we'll take over correspondingly. Moving on, we are moving into an explanation given by again Sri Adi Shankaracharya, as the Bhashyakara, who played the role in the capacity of Bhashyakara for the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so where it is for the 15th chapter, verses 16 to 18, where it is said that in the world of transmigratory life, there are two persons grouped as two. The perishable, consisting of all that perishes or wears away, is the first group. So this is the Jivatman. We saw that how different schools are supporting the theological tradition, where there is a Jivatman and Paramatman as part of the Purusha Tattva. Here, the Bhashyakara explains the Jivatman. The second is the imperishable person opposed to the first, the Lord's power of Maya, the seed whence the first group springs up, on which depend the cravings, acts, and impressions of the numerous beings that transmigrate. Okay. So next he is explaining the Paramapurusha, so the Maheshwara Tattva, which is part of the Maya. So both Purusha and Prakriti are part of Maya according to Advaita. We'll deep dive what is Maya and all when we get into the Advaita session. The Lord himself points out which these two persons are. The perishable person consists of all beings, the entire body of transformations. The immovable, the stable group resembles a heap. Kuta. Or Kuta is Maya, deception, tortuousness, crookedness of will. All these beings are synonymous. It is what stands out as the manifold Maya of deception for the seeds of transmigratory life. So, transmigratory life is the samsara chakra, are inexhaustible. So it is styled imperishable. So there's a vicious cycle of birth, death, based on the karma phala of the individual souls. That is what is highlighted here. So Jivatma are in a perennial cycle of samsara chakra. So that is what is highlighted. So it is styled imperishable. So it is the samsara chakra is it's like a loop. It's a closed loop where birth follows death and death follows birth. So Hinduism believes in reincarnation. So there is life before birth, there is life after death. Okay, so that is what is highlighted here. Other than these two, the perishable and the imperishable, untouched by the taints of these two groups of adjuncts and eternally pure, awake and free, is a supreme spirit. So then he talks about how the supreme spirit, the Maheshwara Tattva or the Paramapurusha Tattva, is distinct from these dependent Jivatmas who are bound by the samsara chakra. The supreme spirit, on the other hand, is the other, altogether different from the first two. So he talks about Purusha, he talks about Paramapurusha, and he also talked about the Jiva Purusha. Now the Jiva Purusha is different from both Purusha and Prakriti. Similarly, the Paramapurusha is also different. It is beyond these two, body, etc., postulated through Nisians. It is also the self, the inner self of all beings. So here it says that the supreme spirit is beyond Jivatma. It is also beyond the Prakriti or the world, which includes all the material, including the body. Okay, postulated through Nesians, which are all bound by avidya. Avidya is binding the Jivatman. It is also binding the Jada, the Jadatman or the Jada Tattvas. Okay. The Paramapurusha is the innermost being of both the Jiva and the Jada. So that is why it is called as Antaryamin. So here if you see, it synergizes with the Vishishtaadvaita Tattva, where we talk about the Antaryami Avatara of Vishnu. Okay. So it is the innermost, it is called the Supreme Self in the Upanishads, dealing with the quintessence of the Vedas. Again, he is characterized as the one who upholds by his presence the three worlds. Okay. Bhu, Bhuha, Swaha. Okay, by the virtues of his spiritual potency and strength. So the three realms of the terrestrial realm, the intermediate realm, and the aerial realm or the heavenly realm are all managed by are governed by this Ishvara Tattva. He is immutable for he knows no diminution. Okay, so while he governs this, he is not affected by this. So his act is all nishkamya. So he is a swatantra sattva. He is not dependent on any of his acts. He is not impacted by his acts, by the karma of the pancha karma, like creation, sustenance, dissolution, and covering or encapsulation, and then the grace or blessing, right? He transcends the impacts of that. He is not personally affected by them. That's what it means. So so though he is responsible for the governance as the Maheshwara Tattva, he is the governor, yet he is not impacted by it. So then who is he? The omniscient Lord called Narayana, who rules as a matter of course. So he is Narayana here. So he is theologized as Narayana. Here Narayana is used more as the Paramapurusha, not restricted to a theological identity. Here Narayana is more like an attribute to Ayana, Nara, and Ayana. So he is the responsible for the world. Okay. So the celebrated name of the Lord, as explained above, is the Supreme Spirit, Purusha Uttama, Purushottama, etymologizing the name to reveal its denotative power. The Lord presents himself as the unsurpassed sovereign. So the Narayana has a deeper meaning based on its etymology, as Vishnu Sahasranamam states that, which is also part of the Mahabharata. And Adi Shankara has written a commentary on that. And so there also we can find what is the meaning of Narayana. Since I surpass the perishable, the magic fig tree of transmigratory life, and exceed even the imperishable, the seed of this tree, I am the supreme, the highest being above these two, the perishable and the imperishable. I am celebrated in the common speech of the Vedas. The devotees call me the Supreme Spirit. The poets employ the name in their poems and so forth, extolling me. So here Adi Shankara says that why God is glorified, because he transcends both the Jivatma, which is eternal, in the sense that Jivatma does not have death. It is imperishable, but it undergoes the transmigratory cycle of the samsara chakra, metempsychosis, they call it, the birth cycle. Paramapurusha, however, who governs these cycles, is not impacted by this cycle. He does not undergo this cycle, and that is why he is glorified as the Lord who is running the entire show. Now we can see how Sri Ramacharya in his Bhashya explains this. There are, the Shastra says, two kinds of persons, the Purusha, well known to the world, the perishable and the imperishable. Of these two, the person designated by the term perishable, Kshara. So the Shara and Akshara is what is being described here. The Shara means perishable here, are beings conjoined with the non-conscient matter of modifiable nature, from Brahman down to the blade of grass, who can be signified also by the term Jivas, individual. So here he is explaining again two scopes of Purusha. The first is explaining the Jivatman, who is the bound soul, who is called as Achit here. So this Achit is not only who's called as Chit here, Chittatman, because he is sentient. He is sentient, but it is perishable. It is Shara, because it is called perishable not because the Atma will cease to exist. It is perishable here from the samsara chakra point of view. So the Jiva plays different roles in different janmas. So it accumulates the Tanuk, Karana, Bona, Boga in each janma. So Tanu means body, Karana means the Indriyas, the instruments, Bhuvana means the worlds wherein it has to operate, and Bhoga is the experience around it. So all these things are part of the Shara. They are perishable. So between birth and death, he undergoes all these experiences, and then once he dies, he quits this body. So his body is withdrawn from him. That is called as death, and then he acquires a new body, and this cycle of samsara goes on. Here the term Purusha is used in a singular to indicate the common single condition of being conditioned with non-conscient matter. So what he says is that in the Gita, the Purusha is used as in a singular form, to say the Purushatva, the nature of that bound soul, where it gets bound by the Achit Tattva. So what is called bound by Achit Tattva is called as the Pasabandha in Saiva Siddhanta. Saiva Siddhanta also has a similar concept where the jiva is called as a pasu because it is bounded soul, and it is bounded by what? It is bounded by the pasa of the world. So that is the pasa. So same thing is highlighted here. So the difference between Saiva is Vishishta Advaitam and Saiva Siddhanta is this. Saiva Siddhanta, the Paramapurusha is Shiva. In Vishishta Advaita, the Paramapurusha is Vishnu. Otherwise, the Jiva part more or less the same. Both are considered it as bound. Here it is called as a Baddhatma. There it is called as a Pasha. Okay, and the Achit world is what is binding them. Okay. That which is imperishable, Akshara, then he moves to the imperishable, is called the unchanging, Kutastha. So there are two synonyms, two adjectives used here. One, it is imperishable. That means it is, it doesn't perish. It is eternal. Okay, and it is also unchanging, unmodifiable. Okay, which is the Kutastha. This is the realized self, devoid of association with the non-conscient matter, remaining in its own form. It is called the unchangeable, inasmuch as when free from non-conscient matter, it has no specific connection with particular transformation of non-conscient matter like the bodies of Brahma, etc. Here also, this designation of the term in singular as expressing a generic class. So what is explaining why, although Purushas are multiple in the school, why Purusha is explained in singular in the Gita, is explaining that it is more used from a generic, from its generic form, which is the Samanya Lakshana. So not as a Vishesha, not as a particularizing term. So it is more used as a universal term here. Okay. So denoting the totality of the liberated selves is used as an account for the single condition of dissociation from non-conscient matter. So first he differentiates between Jivatman, which is Shara, perishable because it goes to the underlying cycle, but it is Chitta because it is conscient, and it is different from Achit, which is the insentient matter. Second, all these chit which are multiple, which is aneka, are classified in a singular form here, and they are all bound principles, bound by Prakriti and yet different from Prakriti. Purified with austerity of knowledge, many have attended my state. They are not born at the same time in creation, nor do they suffer at the same time. So once we transcend the bondages, the limitations, we get the Brahmanyana, and we become united with Vishnu as part of the Mukti. And there is Salogya, Samipya, Sayujya, Sahaja, different kinds of Muktis allocated here. So there is not Mukti by identity, but there is Mukti by union in Vishishta Advaita. That means you don't become one with, identically one with Vishnu, but you become united with Vishnu as part of him. Okay. But there is a supreme person who is other than the bound and liberated selves. So here he is speaking classification between the Baddhatma and the Muktatma as the two kinds of Jivatma. So first is every soul is bound, and then the bound souls are then liberated. Once they get liberated through Mukti, there are different kinds of Mukti. They are closer with God. They are they share the domain of God, etc. Okay, so these are the Muktatman. So there are the Baddhatman, there are the Muktatman. These are the two kind of Mahatman that were discussed in the earlier paragraph. But there is a supreme person who is other than the bound and the liberated, the perishable and the imperishable. Different category. Okay, so what is perishable is the Jivatman, because it perishes from Janma to Janma. Every kill of samsara, it is a nested loop, which is he keeps on taking birth after birth after birth, depending on karma phala. So this is the Baddhatma, so which is perishable, which is Shara. Then there is a Muktatman, which is got liberated from this infinite loop. That's why it is a Muktatman. This Muktatman, because it is free from the infinite loop, it is called as Akshara, and it gets united with God, not identified with God, but united with God. Okay, and beyond these two form, there is a third form of Purusha, who is the Parama Purusha, who is different from these two. That is what is highlighted here. All the Shrutis call the Supreme Purusha is a category distinct from the bound and the liberated states. Okay, so the Jivatma is talked in two categories here. So one is the Baddha Jivatma, and then there is the Mukta Jivatman. Beyond these Jivatman, there is something called as Paramatman. So Purusha Tattva and Prakriti Tattva of Sāṃkhya is recognized here. The Purusha Tattva is split into Jivatman and Paramatman. The Paramatman is one, but the Jivatman is again split into Baddhatman and Muktatman. Okay, so that is how we should understand this. So he is now explaining about the Supreme Paramatman. But there is the Supreme Purusha who is other than the bound and liberated selves, expressed by the terms the perishable and the imperishable. So the perishable is the Baddha Jivatman, the imperishable is the Mukta Jivatman. So the Parama Purusha is Mahavishnu is different from both these. He forms a completely different category. All Shrutis call him the Supreme Self, but by that very designation as the Supreme Self, it may be known that the Supreme Person is a category distinct from the bound and the liberated selves. Okay, this is reiterating whatever we discussed. However, how? So then he's explaining how. Entering the threefold world supports it. So the Parama Purusha is different from these two Purushas, the Baddha Jivatman and the Mukta Jivatman. How he is different is that he enters them. So he enters them as Supreme Purusha, okay, into the three worlds, okay, the Bhuloka, Bhorloka, and Swarloka, and supports it. The Loka and supports it. So he is the supporter of this. Okay, so he is the Adhara for it. Okay, Loka is that which is perceived. So the term this is a very beautiful concept. Etymologically, the term Loka is related to your vision or how you perceive it. Lochana also is related terms etymologically. So that is what is highlighted here. Loka is a epistemological world construct here. So Loka is that which is perceived. Okay. There are three such possible worlds. He enters. So we saw the Gaya, and if you take the Gayatri mantra, also talks about the Bhur Bhuva Swaha, right? These are the three major worlds. Of course, there are other worlds also, but here the highlight is the three major worlds. He enters the three worlds, which can be understood from the authority of the Shrutis. So he enters these worlds. That is why he is called as Purusha. So he enters. So Purusha is derived from Puram. Puram means a place, so a dwelling place. So because he indwells into these Purushas, the three Purams, Tripuras, he is called as a Purusha. He enters the three worlds, which can be understood from the authority of the Shrutis. There are the world of unconscient matter, the world of the conscient selves conjoined with matter, and the world of the liberated selves. So these three worlds he is categorizing into the world of unconscient matter. So there is primary matter only without sentience. Okay, then there is the sentient world, where the sentient world leverages the insentient world as its body. And then there is the third. Okay, the world of conscient selves conjoined with matter, and the world of the liberated selves. Okay, so this is the three worlds. He penetrates into all these three worlds. So we talked about two kinds of Purusha, the Baddha Jivatman and the Mukta Jivatman. Okay, and there is a third kind, the Paramapurusha. The Paramapurusha inheres into these two jivas. How he inheres? He inheres into the three realms of these worlds, the three lokas. Okay, and the three lokas are nothing but the material world, and the material world and the sentient world. Okay, so there are three worlds of the unconscient world: the world of the conscient matter conjoined with matter, and the world of the liberated selves. So the liberated selves have actually liberated from their material bondage, the pasa. We saw that in Saiva Siddhanta, it is called as pasha, the material world. So once you get liberated from that material bondage, you are into the third realm. So these are the realms of the Jivatmans. These realms are penetrated by the Paramapurusha. Okay. As understandable from the Shrutis, he enters into these three categories as their Atman and supports them. So this is again a very important point. We talked about three worlds: the insentient world, which is the Achit. Okay, then there is a sentient world, which is for the Chit. Okay, the insentient world is the material world. The sentient world, it is the world of the Jivatmans, and then there is the world of the liberated souls, the Muktatmans. Now he penetrates into all the three. So even the insentient realm. Okay, so even the bhutas, the jada bhutas, okay, or the achit bhutas, though we call it as achit, they are actually divinities inherent into it as antaryamin. Okay, so this is what the famous Narasimha Avadara also establishes, right? Yeah. So when Hiranyakashipu is questioned by his father on the presence of God or proof for God, and when he prays, that instance Narasimha descends down, and he descends down, breaking open from a pillar, and so he says that I am inside the pillar also. So Tunilum Irpan, Turumbilum Irpan. So that all pervasive presence is also pervading within the so-called nescient matter, or Jada or Achit Bhuta Tattva also. So that is what is highlighted here. Okay. As understandable from the Suti, he enters into the three categories as their Atman and supports them. Thus, he is an entity different from the triad, which he pervades and maintains. So, he is different from the Jadatman, he is different from the Jivatman, and he is different from the Muktatman. Further, he is different as he is imperishable and he is the Lord. Okay, being imperishable, he is different from the bound non-conscient matter whose nature is subject to decay. He is different from the bound conscient self, as the latter is subject to Prakriti and follows its laws. So he explains how he is different from the Jiva aspect of the Purusha, and also the Prakriti aspect, the Jada aspect of the Prakriti. He is also distinguished from the liberated souls. How he is distinct from them, yet he penetrates into them. This is what the Vishishta Advaita concept of it. So there is a Vishishta concept, there is a particularization, there is a specialization of Abheda and Bheda. So there is a Bheda between Jada Tattva, there is a Bheda between Jada Tattva and Ishvara Tattva, there is a Bheda between Jada Tattva and Jada Tattva, and there is a Veda between Jada Tattva and Mukta Tattva, and there is a Veda between Mukta Tattva and Jiva Tattva, and Mukta Tattva and Ishvara Tattva, and Mukta Tattva and Ishvara Tattva. So Vishishta Advaitam here incorporates Prakriti Purusha concept of Sāṃkhya, and it identifies the theistic model where Parameshwara is identified, and Parameshwara is considered as Mahavishnu, and that Mahavishnu penetrates into the Jiva and the Jada as well as the Muktatman, yet it is different from him. Okay, so in the earlier version of Advaita, also the Jiva and Paramapurusha is there, and the Jada of the world of Maya is also there. The Bhuta Avasthas are also there. All the entities of Sāṃkhya is also there. But there, the difference between Jiva and Jivatman and Paramatman, or the Jagat and the Brahman, is virtual. Okay, it is vivarta. It is so it is an mithyatva. So it is apparent. Okay, it is real yet apparent. Okay, but here in Vishishta Advaita, it is Advaita. So it also says there is only one Atma, which is there is only one Paramapurusha, there is only one Brahman, that is the Parabrahman, there is none other than the one Brahman. But all the differences are contained within it, and this Paramatman penetrates to these differences. The differences are there, the differences are part of the Vishishtatva, where the Bheda is highlighted. At the same time, the Abhedatva is where the Parabrahmatvam is highlighted. Okay. So this idea is again can be compared to Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta also, where within Vyavaharika Sattva all the differences are there, but in the Paramatika Satya no differences are there. It is the one and only Brahman. Okay, so there are two different ways of models of explaining the Purusha Prakriti Tattva in a theistic way, but identifying the Bheda and Abheda Vada in between these schools. Okay, in Kevala Advaita Vada, it is Kevala Advaita, only the Abheda aspect is highlighted. In Vishishta Advaita, it identifies the Vishishtatvam as well as the Advaitatvam. So the Bheda and Abheda are highlighted. So technically, Vishishta Advaita is a kind of Veda Vada. It supports Veda and it also supports Abheda. Okay, similar to it, the schools of Nimbarkacharya or the school of Vallabhacharya within the Vaishnava Sampradaya, or the Shivadvaita Darshana within the Saiva Sampradaya from the Agamanta schools. The Srikanta school also supports that. Saiva Siddhanta also supports some kind of the Veda Vada between the Purusha and the Prakriti. There is Abheda because eternally, so in Saiva Siddhanta it is explained very beautifully as Ondrai, Udanai, Verai. So he is one. So there is Abheda. There is only one thing, it is Abheda. Then he is Udan. Udanai means it is identity, it is relationship of union. So the Jivatma and Paramatma are united, always closely united. The Jivatma is so dependent, it cannot be outside of Paramatma or independent of Paramatma. Okay. At the same time, he is transcendent. So he is more immanent and transcendent. That is what it says. The transcendence talks about he is away from the world, he is different from the world. The immanence talks about that he pervades the world. So same concept is there. And slightly differently explained. Okay. In as much as I transcend the perishable, that is the bound person of the aforesaid nature, and I am higher for reasons stated earlier,
than the imperishable person or liberated self. Therefore, I am styled the supreme person in the Smriti and the Shrutis. So the Paramapurusha explains here how he is why he is called Paramapurusha, because he is different from them. The Smriti is called the Smriti is called Loka by reason. The Smriti calls it Loka by reason of its leading to the meaning of the Vedas. The meaning is that I am famous in the Shruti and in the Smriti. In the Shruti, for instance, reaching the supreme light, it appears in its own nature. He is the supreme person. He quotes from the Chandogya Upanishad. In this Smritis, so he quotes the Shruti, now he quotes the Smriti. In the Smriti, we have texts like, I will approach him, Sri Krishna, the supreme person, who is the incarnation of a portion of Vishnu, who is without beginning, middle, or end. So he quotes again from the Vishnu Purana. So he is making one citation Shruti from the Shruti and one citation from the Smriti, which is particularly Vishnu Purana. So this is the Ramanuja Bhashya for the verses from the Bhagavad Gita, where Purusha Tattva and Prakriti Tattva are explained. So this becomes a very detailed explanation. So I have explained both the Shankara Bhashya and the Ramanuja Bhashya, so that we can compare, contrast, and see the synergies and also the differences. Both schools accept the Shankara, the Sāṃkhya model of Purusha and Prakriti, and they give a theological flavor to it. Okay. Please remember that unlike in the case of Nirishvara darśana, that is the atheistic declarative philosophy of Sāṃkhya advocated in the classical Sāṃkhya, there is a detailed account of the theistic philosophy declared across parts of the Mahabharata, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which you have already seen. Okay. So in the theistic declarative, the dualistic polar principles of Purusha Tattva and the Prakriti Tattva are not fundamentally independent principles, but are rather treated as higher nature and lower nature of the Supreme Self. In other words, former is the Adhyatmika, while the latter is the Adhibhautika. So the material and spiritual, so concepts. Okay. So what I'm trying to say here is that, so if you take the Cartesian duality between mind and matter, we can parallelize that. Purusha is the corresponding to consciousness here. Okay, while there it is reduced to mind. Here it takes a broader role of consciousness, and the consciousness implies the self, and then there is the matter, the object, the subject and the object. As consciousness is subject, he is the Purusha, and as Prakriti is object, he is the matter or nature. Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita again says the Prakriti of mind is divided eightfold, thus earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, and also egoism. So these are the major evolutes, the Panchabhutas plus the Antakaranas 3. Okay, so there are totally 24 principles of Prakriti and one additional Purusha Tattva, 25 evolutes. Out of those, what is highlighted in this verse is the 8 major components, which is the 5 Bhuta Tattvas and 3 Chit Tattvas, or the Antakarana Tattvas. Okay. O mighty armed one, this is the inferior Prakriti. Know this, the other Prakriti of mind, which however is higher than this, which has taken the form of individual souls and by which this world is upheld. Understand thus that all the things sentient and insentient have these as their sources. I am the origin as also the end of the whole universe. O Dhananjaya, there is nothing else whatever higher than myself. All this is strung on me like pearls on a string. So this Prakriti itself here is explaining into a superior and inferior. The inferior one is the corpus of the physical, gross physical elements, Panchabhutas and the Antakarana. Beyond that, there is subtler or concept, which includes the other tattvas of Sāṃkhya, included here. Okay. These are very important, philosophically speaking, polymorphically loaded verses from the Gita, providing multivalent interpretations provided by respective acharyas, okay, and the bhāshyakaras, basically, the commentators, okay. So belonging to different darshanas. We already saw two different darshanas. While between these traditions, there is more or less a common agreement in terms of 7.4 and 7.6 when it comes to 7.5. All these are Bhagavad Gita verses. These are subtle doctrinal differences between them. Please be noted that here the verse 7.5, the Prakriti Tattva, nature principle, rather than the Mula Prakriti Tattva. So the primordial nature principle technically manifests in the dual modes of Paraprakriti, higher nature, and Aparaprakriti. So in the last slide, we saw there's Paraprakriti and Aparaprakriti. The gross and subtle natures are lower and higher nature of Prakriti Tattva. This is an explanation around this. For example, Madhvacharya explains it, that the 7.5 verse. Okay, so he explains Appara Prakriti or lower nature. So we saw Purusha as being earlier slides, earlier to the last slide. We are seeing how Purusha Tattva is broken down into Jivatma and Paramatman, and Jivatman again split into Baddha Jivatman and Mukta Jivatman. Okay, now the Prakriti Tattva is subclassified here. Prakriti Tattva in the earlier slide itself of the Bhagavad Gita, we saw that it is getting classified into lower and higher, Apara and Para Prakriti. Okay, now Madhvacharya gives an explanation. We'll first look at Madhvacharya's explanation here as part of his Bhashya. Apara Prakriti, okay, or lower nature is that which is inferior to what is to be spoken of hereafter. It includes the Jiva souls also by Upalakshana, characteristic sign. The Paraprakriti or a higher Prakriti or primordial nature is the Shri Tattva, goddess Lakshmi. So here is a very beautiful explanation by Madhvacharya, where he explains how the Prakriti itself has two major dimensions. The first dimension is the lower dimension, which corresponds everything to the Jivatma related stuff. And then there is the Paramatma, then there is the Lakshmi Tattva, so which is the polar principle or Dharmapatni of Mahavishnu. So this Lakshmi Tattva is considered as a Paraprakriti, the higher Prakriti is the Shri Tattva. Shri means Lakshmi Tattva. So she is described by the Lord as Jiva Bhuta, or sustaining the life of the Jivas. So the Apara Prakriti is sustained by the energy provided by what is called as the Lakshmi Tattva, or who is called as the Shakti Tattva, Shri Tattva. So in Saiva theology is called as the Shakti Tattva because it provides power. Here it is called as Shri Tattva because Shri means auspiciousness or wealth. Okay, both connote the same thing. It provides the wealth of energy, okay, or the potency to the underlying Aprakriti Tattva, for sustenance of the Aprakriti Tattva. She is described by the Lord as Jiva Bhuta, or sustaining the life of the Jivas. Or to explain it in another way, she is Jiva Bhuta, as being of the essence of the intelligence, Jiva, both in spirit and in body, while the other epithet, Bhuta, as reference to her eternal existence without undergoing changes of state, as does the Jada Prakriti. Okay. Here, the Jiva Bhuta term is explained. The Jiva Bhuta is the term explained used by Madhvacharya here, and he explains why that term is being used. The term Jiva Bhuta is used here to explain that the Jiva represents the Sharatva of the Jiva, that means the transmigrative nature of the Jiva, and the Bhuta represents the Aksharatva of the Tattva, that means it will not keep changing. Okay, so as does the Jada. That means it's like he's giving a layman example of humans or any living being undergoes change. From a child it grows to youth, from youth to middle age to adult. So there is always a change. But if you take any jada tattva, like a stone, the stone remains a stone, right, throughout its period. So in that analogy, you have to interpret this. Okay. So as a reference to our eternal existence without undergoing changes. This sense of Bhuta is supported by the Shruti describing Chit Prakriti or goddess Lakshmi as their great unchanging being. So the Jadatva here represents Aksharatva. Okay, Jadatva means not insentient. Here Jadatva represents the Aksharatva here. Okay. So that is what Sri Madhvacharya in his Bhashya explains for the Bhagavad Gita verse 7.5. Okay. And elsewhere in another text, okay, so earlier text is the Bhagavad Gita Madhva Bhashya, and elsewhere in his Madhva Gita Tatparya Nirnaya. So Madhva in his Gita Tatparya Nirnaya, he explains the divine pair of Lakshmi Narayana representing the higher nature and lower nature of the Supreme Self. His theologists are the divine parents. So we already saw earlier how the concept of Purusha and Prakriti get into a wedlock, like Shiva Shakti in Saivism and Lakshmi Narayana in Vaishnavism. For further details, you can look at the earlier video, 3.7 session, where we have deep dive here. Here, Madhvacharya explains that in terms of the Jadatva and the Bhutatva, Jivatva and the Bhutatva talked about in the earlier slide, where he talks about gross and subtle are the twofold para and apara prakriti, are the twofold forms of prakriti, endowed with the three attributes of sattva, rajas, and tamagunas. So there are prakriti exhibits three kinds of gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay, we'll deep dive what that means in the next session. Okay, but for now, understand that there are three attributes. The subtle consciousness, Sri Devi, is the beloved Sri Hari. So the beloved of Sri Hari. So she is the Dharma Patini of Sri Hari. Both these forms, being supervision to Sri Vishnu, cause the world to be created. Sri Vishnu is the father of the world, and Sri is the subtle consciousness is the mother. How the divine parentage role is played by Purusha and Prakriti according to the interpretation of Sri Madhvacharya is explained in this verses from this text on the Gita Tatparya and Nirnaya. Next, we'll move to what Ramanuja says. So let us take the case of Vishishtadvaita Darshana, which is the qualified non-dualistic philosophy. Okay, here, while there is agreement in interpreting the Divya Prakriti dual nature as Chit Tattva, sentient principle, and Achit Tattva, respectively. Okay, so however, the main difference here is in the interpreting the Chit Tattva, sentient principle, as Jivatma, corporeal spiritual principle, than the Shri Tattva, goddess principle, according to Dvaita Vedanta. In Dvaita Vedanta, we saw that how the Paraprakriti is nothing but the Lakshmi Tattva. Here in Vishishtadvaita, the Prakriti, the Paraprakriti, instead of calling it as the Shri Tattva, slightly different interpretation is given. So, for example, Ramanuja, as part of his famous Bhashya, explains this. This is my lower Prakriti, but know my higher Prakriti, which is different from this, that is, whose nature is different from this inanimate Prakriti, constituting the objects of enjoyment to animate beings. It is higher, that is more preeminent compared to the lower Prakriti, which is constituted only of inanimate substances. This higher nature of mine is the individual self. Know this as higher Prakriti, through which the whole inanimate universe is sustained. So he does not bring Lakshmi Tattva as part of the Prakriti, in the same way as in the same way as Madhva has interpreted. Here he says that the Prakriti, the Jiva has two, okay, the Jivatman and the Muktatman, okay, and the Prakriti is higher and lower, okay. So know this as my higher Prakriti through which the whole inanimate universe is sustained. The higher Prakriti is also an attribute of Mahavishnu through which the lower Prakriti is moderated. Thus, according to Jiva Bhuta, living being, here in this verse, he refers only to Jivatma Tattva, corporeal soul principle, and Sri Vedanta Desikacharya, who comes in the lineage, further corresponds to this topic in his Tatparya Chandrika, a famous exposition on the Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ramanuja Bhashya. So in his Tatparya Chandrika, which is one of the treatises by Vedanta Desikacharya, who is one of the principal disciples of Sri Ramanujacharya, and who's the founding father of the one of the sub schools of Sri Ramanuja's Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, basically the Vadagalai school of Sri Vaishnavism. Okay, he further explains on this concept. So all we need to understand is that both Vishishtadvaitam and Dvaitam consider Paramapurusha as Vishnu, and both considered Purusha taking the role of Paramapurusha and Jiva Purusha. And while defining the Prakriti as Appara Prakriti and lower Paraprakriti, there are subtle differences in treating of Lakshmi in these roles and between these schools. Finally, we'll move to Shankara Bhashya, the commentary of Shankara, where interestingly the former Jiva Bhuta is interpreted in the Kevaladvaita Darshana, Sautra Mimamsa Kevaladvaita Darshana, as the Paramatman pervading into the Prakriti Tattva and manifesting himself as the bound corporeal soul, as the Baddha Jivatman. For example, the Bhagavad Pada reads thus: O mighty armed one, I am this, is Apara, the inferior Prakriti, not the higher, but the impure, the source of evil, and having the nature of worldly bondage. With the nose, Anyam, they are, so he is explaining each of the Sanskrit terms. Anyam, the other, pure, Prakritim, Prakriti, me of me, me means of mine, which is essentially myself, which however is higher, more exalted than this Prakriti already spoken of. Jiva Bhutam, which has taken the form of the individual soul, which is characterized as the knower of the field, which is the cause of sustenance of life, and Yaya, by which Prakriti, this world, is upheld by permeating it. Here he says that Vishnu permeate the Jada Tattva as well as the Jiva Tattvas. He doesn't categorize as the role of Lakshmi here as well. Well, the philosophical point is not very explicitly stated by Bhashyakara, that is Adi Shankara here in the above commentary. However, subsequent subsequently a Tikakara, the annotators belonging to the same lineage of Kevala Advaita, have clarified it more explicitly. For example, in Gudartha Deepika, which is a phenomenal work by none other than Madhusudana Saraswati, where he explains integrates the devotional as well as the Jnana Marga and the Bhakti Marga in interpreting the Bhagavad Gita verses. Okay, so where he says that I am the Prakriti, which was previously described as being eightfold and as consisting of some total of all the insentient things, is Apara, inferior, because it is unconscious, meant to subserve others, and is of the nature of worldly bondage. Okay, So here he explains that what is apara prakriti, which is consisting of this 8 tattvas. Okay, O mighty armed one, Vidhi, know prakritim, prakriti, me of mine, which, however, by the word fu is meant that that is this latter prakriti, which is the paraprakriti, defies being identified with the previous one in any way whatsoever. Okay, and it is different from this, from the prakriti consisting of the sum total of insentient things and characterizes the field, which is the param or higher superior jivatman, which has taken the form of the jiva, which is sentient by nature, which is characterized as the knower of the field, which is identified by me, and which is absolutely pure, and by which the prakriti characterized as the knower of the field, which has taken the form of the jiva and has entered into them, idam, jagat, world, the sum total of insentient things by which itself is prone to disintegration, is held together as said in the Shruti. By entering into these gods in the form of the soul of each individual, I shall clearly manifest name and form. So here, the role of Kshetra and Kshetragnya keeps differing. The Kshetra is the field, and Kshetragnya is the knower of the field. So the knower of the field is the Atman, and Kshetra is the Prakriti. And the knower of the field is Paramapurusha. Okay, the Paramashetragnya, we can call him, and the Kshetra forms the body. So it is the same Vishnu who penetrates into all these 3 layers and forms all these 3. When in the above text, okay, the 26th principle, who is Parameshwara, okay, is theologized as an aspect of Mahavishnu, whereas in the Linga Purana, the same is theologized as an aspect of. Okay, this is more related to how the 26th principle of Paramapurusha is there. I think this slide I have placed it in a wrong position. While we talking about deep diving about this, where we'll talk about the different ontological evolutes, the 25 principles, 24, 25, 26 principles, we will see that. But here I just want to highlight what the Linga Mahapurana says. Here the Supreme Lord, the object of meditation, is 26th principle, who is the Paramapurusha. The meditator, the Jiva, is the 25th. So the difference between Purusha and Prakriti is highlighted. Purusha itself takes 2 forms. The 26th principle is the Paramapurusha. The 25th principle, the lower one, is the Avyakta, the Pradhana is the 24th. So the Paramatma is the 26th principle, Jivatma is the 25th principle, and the Pradhana, the Mukhya Pradhana or the Avyakta is the 24th principle, which is the Prakriti. So this is the major ontological categorization in the theological school of Sāṃkhya, as explained by Linga Mahapurana, which is one of the Puranas in the coming under the category of Shiva Purana. Okay, so detailed coverage of these topics occurs in the famous philosophical dialogues, both of which occur in the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata, that ensues between Vashishta Maharishi and Karala Janaka Maharaja on the one hand, and one between Yagnavalkya Maharishi and Janaka Maharishi on the other side, aptly titled as Vashishta Karala Janaka Samvada, or the dialogue between these two. Okay, according to this school, Purusha Tattva, soul principles, could potentially undergo Trivida Rangaha, okay, of awakening, of Prabodhanasya. That means, what it means is that it is trifold stages of awakening. Okay, okay, which is the unawakened state, okay, the awakening state, and the awakened state. So the unawakened state is the Apratibuddha or Abuddha Avastha, where which involves the primary matter or the insentient or jada tattva, okay, where consciousness is censored. Okay, so it is encapsulated, it is hidden, it is a gupta. Okay, and then there is the awakening, where is the process of awakening. It is semi-awakened state. So which is chit achit, which is chit and achit, which is hybrid, which is, so the jivatma is neither completely omniscient, so but it is partially sentient. So that is the awakening. So it is in the state of awakening from an unawakened avastha to awakening state, where it is partially awakening, the process of awakening, and finally into the final state of the awakened state. Interestingly, an entire gamut of commerce around the Holy Trinity, which is integral to the various philosophical doctrines, cutting across the cultures, can be mapped to undergo the threefold stages of awakening, as summarized in the table below. So there are 3 stages, where there is the supreme soul, there is the bound soul, and there is the mother nature, the prakriti. So the purusha takes 2 forms: the jiva purusha, which takes some of the prakriti principles, and then there is the Mula Prakriti. There's the Prakriti principle, which is more of the sentient. So there is a Mula Prakriti, which takes the Jiva Purusha and Ishvara Purusha. That is one way of categorizing. So how this duality is broken into a trinity is what is highlighted here. There are 2 entities, which are the blue and the brown circles, and because of their intersection, there is the third principle, the middle ground, okay, which is the Sharat Tattva, Akshara Tattva, and the Paratattva. Okay, this is another way of classifying the trinity. And then there is the Avyakta, unmanifest Tattva. Then there is the Avyakta Lochana, seeing through the unmanifest. And then there is the Kevala Dharma, which is the independent or the absolute singularity state. Okay, and then there is the 24th principle, which it talks about the unawakened cycle. And then there is the 25th principle, which is the awakening cycle, which is the jada, the jiva, and the paramapurusha. Okay, then there is it is also called as maya shakti. So maya shakti is avidya maya. The second is ishvara rupa, which is vidya maya, or paramaya, or so the maya itself is broken into Mula Maya, Tula Maya, and Mahamaya and Maya. So Maya, Mahamaya, Maya, Paramaya, with kind of tattvas. So how this Maya tattva is split, when you get into Saiva Siddhanta, we'll explain more about it. Okay. So then there is Antaryami Vishnu. Then there is Kshetra, Kshetrajna, and Ishvara. So the Kshetrajna is the Jivatman, Ishvara is the God who governs the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. The dualistic model, there is a symbolic synthesis between the Purusha and Prakriti, technically called as the becoming of the being, wherein, as listed in the above table, the latter is Kshetra field, which is the Apratibhuda, or Abhuda Avastha, which is the unawakened state, while the former is Kshetrajna, operating in dual modes of awakening and awakened soul. Okay, so again, Srimad Bhagavad Gita verses help us relate to this concept, where it is said that the blessed Lord said, O son of Kunti, this body is referred to as the field. Those who are versed in this call him as a conscious of it as the knower of the field, so which is the Jivatma. So first he talks about the world, which is the field, and the knower of the field is the Jivatma. And span of the Bharata dynasty understand me to be the knower of the field in all the fields. In my opinion, that is knowledge, which is the knowledge of the field and the knower of the field. So here he says that the knower of the field as a Jivatma, as a Anutva, as a very limited scope. Okay, he knows only partial knowledge. It is only partial knowledge, partial sentience or partial consciousness, because it is partial awakening. Okay, whereas Paramatma is omniscient. Okay, it's a Sarvajna. So he knows everything. That is what is highlighted here. Once you know this difference, you become enlightened. That is what this sloka means. Okay. This, according to Gitacharya, from a epistemological point of view, Moola Prakriti, which is the primordial creation, which is the 24th principle, is considered to be the Sharatatva, perishable, which is Avyakta, Avastha, okay, unmanifest state, technically called as the triadic quality equilibrium. Okay. So, Triguna Samsaya Avastha. And this fact is clearly testified by Sri Kapila Maharishi in the famous Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra, as 61 cited earlier. Okay, we will get back to that Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra when we deep dive into the Sāṃkhya. So, Sāṃkhya Pravachana Sutra is part of the classical Sāṃkhya treatises, granthas. Okay, so where Kapila Maharishi explains that when we get there, we'll get there, wherein the clearly he declares that nature is the state of equipoise of goodness, passion, and darkness. So here, how so the three gunas, okay, are in equilibrium as part of the Moola Prakriti. And epistemologically speaking, as we just observed above, Moola Prakriti primordial is also the Kshetra. Etymologically, the Sanskrit term Kshetra is derived from Shi, to perish, and Sha, to waste, and Tra, to protect. And Purusha is called the Kshetrajna, since he is the Chetana Tattva, conscious principle, who is the Nyatr Prakriti, knower of the nature. To the question as to how in the Mahabharata, the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata, the same Purusha is in terms of Panchavimshaka Tattva, 25th principle, is considered both as Jiva Tattva, Jiva Purusha, as well as the Supreme Soul. Okay, the theologized as the Mahavishnu. A very detailed explanation is given by Sri Shankaracharya Bhagavad and by Sri Ramanujacharya as part of the respective commentaries on the above verses. Okay. Interestingly, while Vyashti, individuality is the crux, while interpreting the terms Kshetrajna and Kshetra in the above verse, respectively, the Jivatman and the Jiva Sharira, human body, both by Sri Adi Shankaracharya as well as by Ramanujacharyas, whereas the crux is on samashti, totality or collectiveness in the interpretation given by Madhvacharya. So the Vyashti Tattva is highlighted by Shankara and Ramanuja in their bhashyas on the Bhagavad Gita verses, okay, on the related themes. While the samashti, the collectiveness or samashti Tattva is explained by Sri Madhvacharya as when he explains about Sri Lakshmi as the as a Paraprakriti. Okay, the Gitartha Sangara. So we have seen the bhashyas of Ramanuja, Sri Madhvacharya, and Adi Shankaracharya, the pre-principal Paramacharyas of the respective Vedanta darshanas. Now we are taking slightly a tangential view from one of the Agamanta schools, the Agamic schools, particularly the Saiva Agamas, which is basically the Trika Saivism, the Paramadvaita Trika Saivism, more popularly known as Kashmir Saivism. Here we are trying to take the Gitartha Sangraha of Abhinava Gupta. Gitartha Sangraha is one of the glosses or commentorial text on the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavad Gita by Abhinava Gupta. So he hasn't given a very detailed commentary, unlike the Vedanta Acharyas, but he has taken and given more or less of a gloss. Okay, somewhere in the scriptures it is heard that the field synthesizer must be worshipped. Is he the same as the soul or Lord, or an altogether different third entity? On a doubt regarding this problem, the Bhagavad instructs idam, etc., kshetrajnam, etc. For persons of worldly life, their body is the kshetra field where the seeds of action grow. That is why their personal soul covered with incoming or foreign or not natural dirt is called field synthesizer. In the case of the enlightened persons, the self-same body is again the kshetra, but there is a difference in etymological meaning. It decays the fetters of the results of action by means of consuming it, and it protects them from the fear of birth and death. With reference to these persons, the Supreme Soul, Vasudeva, is the field sensitizer. He who sensitizes the field, he who causes it to know. Here, the root with includes within itself the meaning of the caused suffix ni. Therefore, the meaning is he on account of whose grace the insentient body attains the status of being sentient. He alone and no one else is the field sensitizer. But the only difference is this: taking into consideration the aspect of limited pervasiveness, he is taken to be the soul, and on account of his unlimited pervasiveness is all in the fields. He is called the Supreme Soul, the Bhagavan Vasudeva. Of me, the sixth sense, in the subjective sense, hence the idea is I am known by means of this knowledge. This is again very important text, because it is probably one of the only commentaries from Trikashaivism on Bhagavad Gita. And second is that while Bhagavad Gita is more of a Vaishnavite text, where Mahavishnu, where Krishna Paramatma is considered as the Vibhava Avadara of Mahavishnu, here the interpretation of the of Krishna Paramatma as Vasudeva, Bhagavad Vasudeva, corresponds to even Shiva here. Okay, so that is from a theological point of view. From a philosophical point of view, the Abhinav Gupta's Trikashaivism is based on Paramadvaita. So it is also Advaitic. It is also identifies the Abhedatva. There is only one reality, and that reality is Shiva. But that reality itself manifests by its Swatantra Sakti into the manifold. The manifold are not unreal, not an illusion, but they are real. They are real. Shrinking of the Shiva by his own independent will. Why he is doing it? It is his own independent will. It is Shiva Leela, Siva Thiruvilayadal. So he does it on his own account. Okay. Here he defines the Kshetrajna, and the Kshetrajna is again takes into the governing Ishvara Tattva and also the Baddha Jivatman. Okay. And how all these are part of the same consciousness. Next, we move on to a verse from Mahabharata, where it says that Vashishta said, where Vashishta Maharishi explains, listen now to me as I discover on the Buddhas, the Supreme Soul, and Abuddha, the Jivas. So he differentiates the Purusha as the Buddha and Abuddha. Okay, which is not to be confused with with Lord Buddha here. The Buddha here means the Supreme Soul, and Abuddha is the Jivatman, which is a dispensation of the attributes of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So the Abuddha is the Achit. The Abuddha is the Baddhatma, who is the Chittatma, which is bound by the three gunas of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Assuming many forms under the influence of illusion, the Supreme Soul becomes Jiva. So here how the Supreme Soul itself becoming Jiva regards all the forms as real. In consequence of his regarding himself identical with such transformation, Jiva fails to understand the Supreme Soul. So there is an avidya there. So the Paramatma himself, out of his own Swatantra Sakti, out of his own supreme will, okay, creates the Jiva Bhavas, and these Jiva Bhavas are put in ignorance, for he bears the attributes of Sattva and Rajas. Because of this Tama Guna, which is a dark principle, there is under the influence of Tamas and Avidya, and creates and withdraws into himself what he creates. ceaselessly for his sport, O monarch. So we saw that it is a Shiva Leela. The Shiva Leela is explained here. So in the Mahabharata, where the Shiva creates this, sustains this, and dissolves this back into himself. He creates it from himself, he sustains it with his own power, and then he dissolves it back into himself. Okay. O monarch, does Jiva undergo modifications and he is capable of understanding the action of the unmanifest. Therefore, he is called as Buddha Yamana, or the comprehender. The unmanifest or the Prakriti can at no time comprehend Brahma, which is really without attributes, or even when manifest itself with attributes. Hence, Prakriti is called unintelligent. So, what is the major difference between Purusha and Prakriti? Purusha is sentient. Either he is completely sentient when he attains the Paramatma stage, but as a Jivatma, he is partially sentient. Okay, so called as but whereas Prakriti is insentient, where it is Jada, but there is God penetrating that also, that we already seen, but that wisdom or that knowledge is censored here. Okay, that is why it is called as nescient knowledge. There is a declaration of the Srutis in the effect that if ever Prakriti does succeed in knowing the 25th Jiva, Prakriti then, instead of being something differentiated from Jiva, becomes identified with Jiva, who is united with her. So how Prakriti and Jiva gets united when knowledge dawns. As regards, however, the Supreme Soul, which is ever disunited and disassociated, and which transcends the 25th Prakriti, can never comprehend it. Okay. So, transcends the 25th, Prakriti can never comprehend it. So, what it means is that while Purusha, when I say Purusha, the Baddha Jivatma, when he attains knowledge, Purusha and Prakriti merge into oneself. Okay, but there, beyond these two limitations of Purusha and Prakriti, these Vedas, there is something called as Parama Purusha, which is a 26th Tattva. Okay. Prakriti then instead of being something differentiated from Jiva, becomes identified. So there is a Prakriti Jiva union that is being highlighted in the Mahabharata. As regards this, however, the Supreme Soul, which is ever disunited and disassociated, and which transcends the 25th Prakriti, can never comprehend it. Prakriti can never comprehend it. So what it means is that it expresses the immanent and the transcendent aspect of Purusha or divinity. The immanent aspect is that first in Jiva Avastha, or in the Baddha Jivatma, as long as the Jiva is operating in a Baddha mode, it is semi-sentient, whereas the Jada Avastha of the Prakriti is insentient. However, these two get united together in terms of the same immanent divinity. So the immanent divinity unites these two together. Okay, but beyond that, there is a transcendent divinity, which is the 26th principle. So the 24th principle is the Purusha Prakriti Tattva, the 25th principle is the Purusha Tattva, and then the 26th principle is the Mahapurusha Tattva. Okay, that is what is highlighted here. So Jiva or Purusha is not manifest, which is the real Jiva or Purusha. Sorry, where I left. Prakriti then, instead of being differentiated from Jiva, becomes identified with Jiva, who is united with her. As regards, however, the Supreme Soul, which is ever disunited and disassociated. So here the transcendent nature is highlighted, and which transcends the 25th Prakriti, can never comprehend. Sorry, every time I read it wrongly. And which transcends the 25th. Okay, and Prakriti can never comprehend it. Okay, in consequence of this, his attachment to or union with Prakriti, Jiva or Purusha, who is not manifest and who is in his real nature, is not subject to modifications, comes to be called as the unawakened or ignorant. Indeed, because the 25th can comprehend the unmanifest, he is therefore called as Buddhyamana, or the comprehender. He cannot, however, really comprehend the 26th. So even the Jivatma cannot comprehend the 26th because he transcends all levels of human comprehension or Jiva comprehension. 26th, which is saintless, which is knowledgeable without duality, which is immeasurable, and which is eternal. Because it is immeasurable, which is beyond Maya. So it is, Maya is a measure, because you cannot, here measure means the way of knowing or observing. But the transcendent is beyond all human observation. Because it is all beyond observation, it is immeasurable and which is eternal. The 26th, however, can know both Jiva and Prakriti. While the 26th can know the 24th and the 25th, it is not the other way around, numbering the 25th and the 24th respectively. O thou of great effulgence, only men of wisdom succeed in knowing that Brahma, which is unmanifest, which inheres in its real nature to all that is seen and unseen, and which, O son, is the one independent essence of the universe. When Jiva considers himself different from what he truly is, that is, when he regards himself as far as learn, fair or dark, Brahman or Sudra, it is only then that he fails to know the Supreme Soul and himself and the Prakriti with which he is united. When Jiva succeeds in understanding Prakriti and knowing that she is something different from him, so where there is a Viveka, so Viveka is there in identifying what is Jada and what is Chitta, the differentiating between body and the self. When Jiva considers himself different from what he truly is, okay, that is, when he regards himself as far or lean from the dark Brahman or Sudra, a Brahmana or Sudra, so that he is not bound by the Varnas, it is only then that he fails to know the Supreme and himself and Prakriti with which he is united. When Jiva succeeds in understanding Prakriti and knowing that she is something different from him, then he is said to be restored to his true nature, and then does he attain to that understanding which is pure and stainless, and which is concerned with Brahma. So as long as he attaches his self with the differences of the Varna, like Brahmana, Kshatriya, Shudra, or with the various other parameters attached to Prakriti, he will always be differentiated from Brahman. But once he realizes that he is beyond all the differences of Varna, etc., he attains the higher state of union with the divinity. Okay, when Jiva succeeds, O tiger among kings, what is called as the 26th principle, he then casts off the unmanifest Prakriti, which is fraught with the attributes of creation and destruction. So this is a very, very important verse from the Mahabharata, where you can interpret it from Advaitic variation, where as long as you see the differences, there is Veda. But once you start seeing as long you are appreciating the difference between yourself from a bound nature point of view, you are different as a Brahmana, you are different from a Kshatriya, you are different from a Shudra, or you are different from a Vaishya, etc., or you are so and so, Nama Rupa Bhava, means that you are bound by the Prakriti. As long as you are bound by Prakriti, you are in a limited scope. But once you realize that all the differences that are brought by Prakriti does not limit you, who transcend all these things, then you become the Paramapurusha. You get into the 26th state. So you are operating from the 25th stage, and you are bound to the 24th stage. But as long as you are getting logged in to that bondage, seeing, just living through the differences, you are a Baddha Purusha. But so the Purusha and Prakriti 24 and 25 are in a tighter wedlock. But once you realize that these are all part of a transcendent divinity, then that jnana takes you to the 26th realm, which is the Advaitic Nilaya of the Paramarthika Sattva. The 24 and 25 probably falls under the Vyavaharika Sattva. This is how I interpret these Mahabharata verses from an Advaitic perspective. Okay, so with this, I conclude today's session. Okay, which the focus of which, as I summarized, was in terms of understanding the theological context of the Sāṃkhya darśana and how the theological context has been imbibed into various other bhāratīya darshanas, particularly within the Hinduism fold. And we saw right from different schools of Vedanta. We also saw some of the Saiva Siddhanta and Kashmir Saivism kind of. So the Purusha Tattva concept, Purusha Prakriti Tattva concept of Sāṃkhya is widely inherited in almost all schools of Hindu philosophy. That is the bottom line I wanted to touch upon. In the subsequent section, we will deep dive into the three gunatva that was mentioned or referred here, into what the three gunas means and how it is treated in these schools. Okay, and as the next immediate session, and correspondingly we move on to the deep dive sessions of the other how these Purusha Prakriti Tattvas, through the help of the three gunas of Prakriti, manifest into various ontological entities, the 24 avidya tattvas, and how the cosmological evolution takes back, and how the soteriological involution, again withdrawal of the Purusha from the bondage of Prakriti again happens, and what kind of bondage they have in the subsequent sections. Okay, with this I conclude. Hari Om, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Narayana. I request you all again, once again, to share your critical and constructive feedback on after listening to this. Of course, there could be a lot of improvements in the style of presentation as well as the content of presentation. Sokkutram, Porukutram, both are there. I can understand that. Please highlight it as part of a constructive criticism, and wherever I can improve, I'll try to improve. Thanks a lot for this patient listening. Completely listened through this and benefited from it. I hope you benefited from it. And do share this video to others as part of knowledge sharing. Okay. And it also helps me to reach out a larger audience, and do like this, so that it is a kind of motivation and a gamification for me to continue to do this. So I understand that there are people listening to it, and there's a need for continuing this sessions. Okay, thank you a lot. Okay. You can always reach out to me through any of my social network channels. Thank you. Let's stop here. Hari Om. Thanks again. See you in the next class. Thank you.